Dr. Rob Linstead and Dr. Jim Barfield. Gentlemen, welcome to the broadcast. Thank you for joining us.
Well, I'm excited to be here because I've been anticipating this all weekend long and for sure today, because I know the viewers are going to really be excited about what Jim has to share with us today.
Indeed. Jim, welcome to the broadcast. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you, sir. This means a lot to me.
It means a lot to our audience, and many are watching. We've been plugging it now for a few days. Jim, what is your website if folks want to find out more about you?
CopperScrollProject.com.
CopperScrollProject.com. Copper Scroll, I'm going to bring it up here. CopperScrollProject.com. Give our audience a little bit about yourself as I bring up the website. I'll show that as while you're talking. Tell our audience about your past and I think a past life at one time, right? As a first responder?
I was a first responder. Actually, I was military.
Okay.
For 10 and a half years. Finished up flying helicopters for the 6th Cav Brigade in Fort Hood, Texas. I became a firefighter. Lawton, Oklahoma. I was there for 23, almost 24 years. I started off as a tailboarder, just a regular firefighter. And then I wound up being an investigator, arson investigator for the Lawton Fire Department, Lawton, Oklahoma. Loved the job, and matter of fact, I won some major awards. I was Oklahoma Investigator of the Year and International Association of Arson Investigators internationally, worldwide. I was a top investigator for that year.
So you bring some of your investigative skills to this new vocation, which is searching for treasure. And as I understand from Rob, you're searching for treasures, not for yourself, that whatever you find, you're going to give to the Temple Institute or the folks there in Israel. As I understand, you don't want a penny for yourself. You're searching to show the validity and authenticity and veracity of the Bible. Is that right?
That is absolutely true.
Yeah.
My biggest goal out of all this is I want to help bring our Messiah, and my grandchildren, great grandchildren, will be living under a righteous King. And gentlemen, that's my goal.
Wow,
that is my heart.
Well, with that being said, let's get right to it. You guys have graciously sent over a PowerPoint presentation tonight. We'll start with this first slide right here. The Copper Scroll, as it was found in 1952. Now, a lot of folks know about the Dead Sea Scrolls, but not many people, even a lot of Christians, I talked to a few people the last few days, they've said, I've never heard of the Copper Scroll. I've heard of the Dead Sea Scrolls, but I've never heard of the Copper Scroll. Tell us about it, please.
Yeah, the Copper Scroll is the way you saw it in that last picture. That's actually the way it was found. That picture was actually the day it was found. And it really is, it's a copper scroll about 7 feet long and about a foot wide. It has 12 columns side by side that describe incredible treasures from the Temple of Solomon. And there's 57 locations. Gentlemen and ladies and gentlemen, this is going to be amazing. If I am absolutely correct, this is going to be world changing.
All right, let's go to the next slide. Is this more of the actual pictures of the Copper Scroll?
That's not an actual picture. That's a composite because the Copper Scrolls had to be sliced into pieces about 4 or 5 inches wide because they couldn't open it. It was so brittle every time they tried to open it, unroll it because it had been rolled up. And people call it the Copper Scrolls. It's not. It's a copper scroll. What happened was whenever they're rolling it up, getting it ready to put in that cave, it snapped in two. It broke off. One section of it, 1/3 of it broke off. So that's what this is. That's what that was all about. That this copper scroll is the only one in the Qumran collection that's actually made out of copper. So what that's telling you is they intended. Who wrote the men who wrote this intended it for it to last to the end of the age. Matter of fact, in 4 of the books that I've read, at the end of it, when they describe this copper scroll and the treasures, all of them say this: these items will not be found until the time of the coming of the Messiah. Now that's pretty amazing, especially with what's happening today and all the biblical things that are happening today. That's what's going on here, and we could be part of biblical history.
Yeah, absolutely fascinating. Now, let me get clear on this. Are you saying that in these caves, again, I want to make sure we're bringing everybody up to speed, even for new people, these are found in a series of caves, 56, 57 caves called Qumran, and that's outside of Jerusalem? Where is that?
No, actually, Qumran is a little village.
Okay.
It has a building, it's a treasury, it's got mikvahs, which are baptismal pools. It's got many different types of building, a little laundry area, a place for the goats and sheep. But what they did is they buried 57 locations inside, or actually 55 locations inside of the ruins of Qumran. It's a little village.
Where is it on the map? Is it outside of Jerusalem? Where is it?
If you go to the Dead Sea,
yeah,
and there would be an ancient town there, and most people associate the little ruins that are there with the Essenes, but whether you can call them by other names, but they were faithful people, and some of the ink that's found in the ruins there, you actually find that same ink used in Masada. So some of those people at one time escaped to Masada, but it's right on the shore of the Dead Sea. So as you leave Jerusalem, I'm going to say about an hour's drive going south out of Jerusalem or so.
Yes, the straight line distance, it's only about 13 miles. But you know how crooked and winding the roads are in Israel. It takes about 45 minutes to an hour to get to the ancient.
Yeah, so you can see where En-Gedi is, and so between Masada and En-Gedi, that's where you're going to find Qumran. And Qumran is famous because during that 10-year period, they found a number of scrolls, and then the hillside lit up with people looking for all kinds of artifacts and treasures. Trouble is, it was haphazard how they went after it, and so in the copper scroll, unique from the other scrolls. And by the way, when I say Dead Sea scrolls, a lot of times people think that they were found in the Dead Sea. No, they were found close to the Dead Sea in this place called Qumran. And Qumran is now an ancient village. There's a famous picture. Everyone who goes to Qumran will see that cave, and that's the famous cave that when you go there, you got to see the cave because it's in every book. But the caves we're going to look at are close to this, but they're not this particular cave. And there were things found in that cave, but the truth is, the exciting part that we're interested in are just a little ways from there.
Now, I want to make sure real clear that ours understands. Do you believe that this copper scroll was it just placed there on the ground? It wasn't buried, it wasn't hidden? And if it wasn't buried or hidden, was it placed in that cave with the intention of someone finding it?
Absolutely. 5 men wrote this copper scroll.
And how do you know 5 men wrote? How do you know that? Because the handwriting's different or what?
There's 2 different documents that say that. There's 5 different handwritings on it. And 2 of the men that wrote this copper scroll were actually Haggai and Zechariah. So now that in itself is very interesting. But they was written by...
Are we talking, wait a minute, are we talking about Haggai and Zechariah as in the Bible?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So are you telling me you have the handwriting of Haggai?
Well, I don't have it, but the actual copper scroll is in Amman, Jordan. Okay. I've got friends over there just sent me pictures today. They were over there and took pictures of it, and that's where the actual copper scroll is right now.
And so you're saying it was placed in this cave. It wasn't hidden. It wasn't buried. It was there, and it was on copper, so it would be preserved. They were intending for someone to find this. It was found, as you said, in 1950. What was it?
52.
1952. It was intended to be found. And am I understanding this is basically a treasure map? Is that what it is?
And that is what it is, a verbal treasure map, 52 locations described in detail so that whoever figured out how to understand it will be able to find each and every one of them. I found them all, I believe, except for one.
Now, are you the only one to have found them? Are you the only one to have been studying and even looking for them?
No, I'm not the only one that's been studying.
Let me just insert something here. Jim, using his skills as an investigator, came into play. And so people have looked at the Copper Scroll. They've looked at other maps. I've discussed with you a mutual friend of Jim and myself, and he's Vendell Jones. The people will know him as Indiana Jones. And finally, there came a time when I parted ways with him because I did disagree with him theologically. But Vendell was pretty clever on the Copper Scrolls. And so Jim and Vendell got together. But Jim has probably spent more time studying this. And I think he put together the key. And one of the keys that he put together was he looked at the map of Jerusalem. And he saw where certain important artifacts were, the column of Boaz, for example. And so then when he comes down to Qumran, I don't know how he got the insight to do it, but he actually flipped over the picture of Qumran, and when you flip it north to south, it lines up with Jerusalem. And so that was a big piece of the puzzle. And so that was part of the puzzle. The other thing that's incredible is this. When he began to look at the scroll, he takes and we'll show this later in our program, he takes the ancient Hebrew, he puts it into modern Hebrew, he translates the modern Hebrew, and then he puts the story. Yeah, there's a great example. And so if you see that first line, it looks like a kindergartner writing. Well, that's probably the handwriting of one of these 5 people. The next line, that's the modern Hebrew. Okay, then we go to the Strong's or literal translation of this, and then we do the composite rendering. When I say we do, Jim has done the work. I'm just an excited spectator, but no one else had really done it to this degree and taken it literally and then got back to the site and really for the last, he started studying this in 1995. I think he started on the Copper Scrolls in 2009. So between 2009 and 2024, he's dedicated 15 years of his life to looking at where these artifacts are, measuring them out with a tape measure, going in and out of case. The patience of that has paid off. And so we're seeing, we're going to, in an hour and a half, we're going to see the result of 15 years of hard work.
Absolutely fascinating. So you start this in 1995, you start studying the Copper Scroll, and you come upon your first clue. What was your first clue?
Actually, the first clue was it's written in the Copper Scroll. It says, under the ruins in the Valley of Achor. That's the first clue. So I knew that I needed to look for a set of ruins within the Valley of Achor, and I knew of one. Qumran, that's the only one I knew of. I've been studying the Dead Sea Scrolls since 1995. I actually started on the Copper Scroll in 2006. And I read the first line, and I thought, this is easy. Well, I had a map of Qumran sitting on my desk, my study room, pulled it out, set it down, and I started reading the first line of it. And my wife tells me this. She laughs at me. She said, Jimmy, you're probably the only guy in history that actually followed the instructions for the first time. Because that's how I did it. I simply followed the instructions. It says, under the ruins of the Valley of Achor. So I sat down with a set of ruins, and I thought, well, if this one doesn't match the treasure burial locations, I'll find another set of ruins. However, logically speaking, these are with the ruins of Qumran, or with the treasures, and I consider the treasures the scrolls that are found there. They were all together, so I figured, you know what? This is the most logical place to start. I'll just start with Qumran. That's where all these scrolls are written. Let's give it a try. It worked incredibly well.
And what did you find? You say it worked. What did you find?
Well, the first thing I did was I read the first one. It says, at the steps heading east, 40 cubits long, are silver service vessels, 17 talents of silver service vessels. The only silver service vessels I was aware of was temple treasure. So I thought, okay, I'll take a look. So I looked at a map of Qumran, and I found a set of steps. The only set of steps that headed east was the one that we've got some pictures of here. It was a mikvah, and it was exactly 40 cubits long. I measured it. I did the math on it, and that's it. That there. And from the very edge of it to the very back of it, I measured it. It was exactly 40 cubits long. Well, actually, it was about the width of my finger off. So I thought, well, that's really interesting, but that could be luck. It could be a coincidence. So I went to the next set of treasure that's buried there. That's location number one. Location number two is filled with massive amounts of gold. That's location number two that you pulled up on the screen. What it said was at the courtyard Hagadol. That means the large courtyard. And it says where the fountain runs into it, dig there in the soft mire. Well, it's not soft mire anymore. Back then, mire was mud. Today, it is hardened up after 400 years. It's hardened up. And that's where I chose. And oh my goodness.
Okay, so you scanned it. You obviously you didn't dig yet, but what you say you think there's gold under there. You say that, I'm kind of giving it away for the sake of time. You say that based on the fact that you scanned it with something, like a big gigantic metal detector, right?
It was a gigantic metal detector. It's 6 feet wide, 6 feet long. It's just a square made out of plastic pipe. And then I've got a device that ties to your chest. Well, here's what happened. I met a gentleman by the name of Moshe Feiglin. He was the deputy speaker of the Knesset. And I told him, and he saw my research, and he was fascinated. He said, why aren't you digging this stuff up? I said, your government won't let me. I said, I can't dig there anyway. But if I tried to do anything, scan it or try to dig, I'd be going to jail. He said, you know what? He said, I'm the deputy speaker of the Knesset. He said, I have diplomatic immunity. I will meet you the next time you come to Israel. Bring your scanner and we'll scan it. And I said, okay. So I gathered my stuff up. A month later, I'm in Israel with Moshe Feiglin and his entourage. And we do a scan of that place. We scanned 5 different locations, and all 5 of them came back with several positive hits of non-ferrous metals. Now that, ladies and gentlemen, was just incredible. And it's in that location location number 2 has 900 talents. A talent, and the best guess that we've got right now is 75 pounds per talent. 900 times 75 times 14 ounces, which is a troy ounce. You have to calculate it that way. And you do the math. And when you realize how much gold is per ounce today, it's somewhere near $2 billion in one location.
That is amazing. And of course, this leads you to believe, I'm going to pull up some other PowerPoints that Rob sent me last week with some graphics in here. That would lead you to believe that overall, because that was just one, as I understand, of the smallest areas, if you were to add them all together, you're thinking you're at what, trillions of dollars just in precious metals?
I honestly, I couldn't say, but I'm going to say probably $1 trillion. But now that's just the metal value. You're not talking, the story behind provenance behind these items. You get a bowl of silver made out of silver, and it's 10 ounces of silver. It's worth probably $250 just the silver. But then you find out that it's from the Tabernacle of Moses. Now, how much is that thing worth? It skyrockets. It's after that. So yes, I do believe it's an incredible amount of money that's buried there.
So let's go then. So you find this first spot with the stairs. I want to show the audience that again, just to remind them what we're talking about. You found this first spot with the stairs. It lined up according to the copper scroll. Then you listened to the copper scroll, went to this second spot with the help of a government official who had diplomatic immunity. You scanned it. Your scans show that there's something there, which again would lead you to believe it's gold based on the scroll. So that's number 2. Pick it up from there, please.
Okay, it's got if you can see that a large point sticking up, it has an L3 by it.
Yes.
That is location number 2.
Okay.
Location number 2 is it's off the charts as far as how much gold, obviously, but the green is a ferrous metal. So I'm guessing those green box-looking things, maybe that's what they are. But blue, red, and orange, I believe, are non-ferrous metals. So those locations, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 different locations there that we got in one scan. Now there's a specific pattern you have to take. You go up, you turn, come back down right beside the other one, and then back and forth until you scan the whole area. Then you go sit down and you get the computer to generate this picture. Ladies and gentlemen, when I saw that thing, I was in Engedi underneath a large canopy thing. And when it popped up on the screen, I about fell out of my chair. Of course I was hoping that, that these items would be there. But those items are all in the locations where I've selected that there would be precious metals found.
And the reason you selected them is because you were following your treasure map, the copper scroll.
Like I said, I just followed the instructions, and that's how this all came about.
In the copper scrolls, as you look at the sections, and remember it's in sections because it's written different than our books, but so this is the interpretation of it. But if you go back to one of the slides we sent, there's really 12 columns, and in those 12 columns, you can see there's different handwriting. Whoever wrote them, how they engrave the letters into the copper scroll, you can see that it's distinct different people, but there's a commonality to this. Yeah, and so that was, there we go. So if you look at that, 12 columns, and so that's the whole of the copper scroll. And so there's clues in there, but in there it names things, and it does name that there's going to be gold.
And why are some of them blacked out, Rob?
That it's actually that was rotted. And you can look back at the other one where it's copper. It's rotted out. It's literally, see the rotted places? That's where we couldn't see the actual text. So I just put that in there to let people know these are where the rotted locations were at.
Okay.
But it also, besides the silver and gold, because I think this is to me, it's a really important point. It talks about items from the house of Moses, let's say the Tabernacle of Moses. So really, there's an excellent chance that some of the very items that were used in the tabernacle could well be here. It talks about the ephod of the priest. Well, in Hosea chapter 3, verses 4 and 5, it says, in the latter days, Israel's going to be without a priest. They're going to be without a sacrifice. I mean, we're talking the red heifer sacrifice and how to get this started. So without a king, without a priest, without a sacrifice, and they're going to be absent of the ephod. Here we are looking for one of the treasures in this is the ephod.
And what is that? What is that?
That's the breastplate of the high priest.
Okay.
And as he wanted to discern the will of God, he would ask questions to it and God would direct him. It's not only made of valuable materials, but also there were 12 stones. Each tribe had a stone. And so this would be an authentic diamond, an authentic ruby. Each tribe had a stone. And those would be genuine stones.
Like that? Like that?
Yep, like that. So can you imagine digging that up? This is going to make King Tut's treasures look like kindergarten work, because this is incredible. Because what it does, it lends credence to the fact that God spoke to Moses. God spoke through the breastplate of the high priest, and it's recorded. It's been buried for 2,500 years. Wow! Right now, we're seeing these things all come into play, and so that's one of the things that might find it. We don't know what's there until we dig, but I know in talking to Jim, there could be the Ark of the Covenant. There could be the kalil, the pot that contains the ashes of the red heifer, the last one that was burned. And now, of course, we have a new surge going on to sacrifice one of the red heifers that's there in Jerusalem right now. So all these things are coming into play, but it's just incredible that after all these years of decoding this to the accuracy, go out and measure it. Think about measuring 40 cubits. I mean, we're talking approximately 50 over 40 yards, and you're off the width of your finger. I mean, I'd say that's pretty accurate.
Yeah, it's pretty accurate. I think what you're trying to say, Rob, is the fact that he was studying this as long as he has been, since 2006, and this is now coming to pass with this understanding and this now revelation, thanks to both of you and your generosity to be here and share with our audience tonight. Combine that with the fact that all these nations are around Israel, ready to go at her, that we have the 5 red heifers from Texas that are now in Israel, that they're ready to sacrifice one or more and grind up their ashes and mix it with water for purification for various Jewish rituals, which will allow for more. The talk of going up on the temple, a potential temporary temple as a tabernacle. We talked about Melissa, who's been going up there on the Temple Mount, who's so well known, who's saying, we got to do this. You have the high priests that are apparently ready. They know who the Levites are. They have their robes, or what they call their costumes. They have their flutes. They now have the Levite choir. And we showed a video the other day of the Levite temple choir practicing. Okay, now, again, I don't get excited about all this because I want to see a temple with sacrifices that will bring about the Antichrist, but that's what's going to happen. I don't get excited because I'm interested in a sacrificial system. Yesterday was Resurrection Sunday, as we know. We celebrate the risen Lord, who was the perfect lamb laid down for the sins of all who place their faith and trust in Christ. We don't need any more sacrifice. He cried out, "It is finished," debt paid in full for those who place their faith and trust in Christ. But we're excited, us tonight, and those watching who get this, because it gives us a timetable. And yet Jesus himself in Matthew 24 is giving all kinds of signs of his second coming, which include telling his disciples, who become the apostles in Matthew 24, that one of the things that's going to happen is there's going to be a temple and this abomination of desolation where the Antichrist sets up an image that speaks words of blasphemy in this temple. Well, you got to have an Antichrist. You got to have Israel back in the land, number one, 1948 May. You got to have an Antichrist. You got to have a temple. And that's what we're talking about. So we get excited because it gives us the signs that Jesus was laying out in Matthew 24 that he said we should be watching for as the sign of his second coming. Do I have that right, Rob?
Yes, and here's another thing that I think is important. How many times have we referred to Ezekiel 38 or 39?
Yes.
We've talked about, here's Rosh, here's Persia, here's all these countries, even Tagarma, Turkey, all of them coming against Israel. And the Bible is very specific that when they come against Israel, they're coming to take a spoil, to take profit. And then it mentions silver and gold. And so, in the past, I've often said, well, maybe it's the wealth of the Dead Sea, or maybe it's oil. And it still could be oil. And maybe it's the natural gas, because Israel has incredible natural gas off their shore. And unfortunately, the United States is trying to get them to give it to Hamas, of all things, and give it to Hezbollah. I hope they hold on to it. I hope they don't take the pressure from the United States. I hope they hold on to it, because that's God's treasure to them. But when I look at the project, the Copper Scroll Project, and I see these artifacts, like Jim said, it's not just the weight of the gold. It's not just the size of the stones in that breastplate. These are antiquities. And so their value is 100 times more, 500 times more. And so I can see any nation say, wow, we want these. The Russians would say, well, we're Coptic Christians, and so we deserve a part of this. And as Jim mentioned, when you look at the Valley of Achor, it's actually Jordan. And so you're going to have all kinds of people claiming heir to this, whether it's Jordan or Israel or these invading nations. But what motivates them to come is the fact that there's value there. And I think this is just one example of a value that could be there that can continue to draw their attention, because their attention is certainly there in the Middle East and in the land of Israel.
Yeah, wow. Go ahead, pick it up from there, sir. You want to add anything?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Right now, Qumran sits in Area C. There's A, B, and C. A, Palestinian. B is a mix of Israel and Palestinian. But C is purely Israeli. Qumran is in that area, and President Trump did a wonderful thing when he mapped out the Abrahamic Accords. As a matter of fact, I was there. They invited me. The Israelis invited me to talk at a temple conference. I spoke there, and President Trump was a big deal at that time. They had a coin made with his picture and Cyrus's picture, and Cyrus, he did some wonderful things. They let him rebuild the temple, and they're comparing Trump to Cyrus. Cyrus let him rebuild the temple, but he also helped them get back the treasures that were in Babylon. Well, I'm gonna call President Trump on my secret red line, and I'm gonna ask him, you've got the temple rolling again, you've got the city back again. Let's get those temple treasures as well. Let's get those things out of there. And I think he would probably give us a hand with that. That's just the kind of guy he is.
Wow, that's amazing. Okay, we got to keep moving because there's so much to get to. Let me go back to my PowerPoint presentation here that you guys so graciously sent along. We'll pick it up from there. All right, there we've got our 12 columns, and then we've talked about this, the most important line, the first line. I guess we've already talked about that, which again led you to this area. What is this picture here?
What you see in there in the foreground is that white area, white sand, that's Qumran.
Okay.
You can see that little village there in the middle. It's not even as big as a football field. So it's pretty small, but that red hill in the background, under that hill is the most important location of all. Actually, on the Copper Scroll, it names that location twice, location number 3 and location number 57. And those 8 locations do something very interesting, but that is Qumran.
Okay.
Brandon, I want to stop here for just a minute because, I've been to Israel 70 times. I've been to Qumran probably at least 70 times. And so I've walked over these ruins. I've dug in a cave down the road with Findle Jones, and only to find that we were digging in the wrong cave. Okay, and it reminds me kind of the people that went on the gold rush to California. A lot of them, in their anxious moment to get to wherever they thought they were going, they walked right over the most valuable gold mines in the world. And I think of how many visitors, literally thousands of visitors a week, go there during the tourist time, and they're walking right over some of these treasures, and they're within eyesight, and they walk right by them. So if people have been to Israel, they'll recognize Qumran, the store, the ancient village, even the parking lot where the bus parks, and just down the path a little bit, that's this location that we see, the big red heap. And as Jim mentioned, that's really 2 of the locations. I think it's L57 and L3. And so L3 is one that we showed that has an incredible amount of non-ferrous material. And 57, we'll get to that maybe sometime tonight, or if not, we'll do it another program, because I tell you that we're going to hit the tip of the iceberg. I'm not kidding you. That's how much information is for this. And so this is just incredible. It verifies the truth of God's word. Sooner or later, the more we dig, the more we look at events taking place in the world, we can say the Bible's true.
Indeed it is. Rob, is Mark around anywhere?
Yes, he is.
Can you have Mark send me the PowerPoint you sent me last week? Because there's some slides in that PowerPoint that I don't see in this one. I want to show those. So if Mark could send those to my email, not Logan, send them to mine so they come here to me.
Yep.
You had a map in there, Rob, that showed Jerusalem and then Qumran right next to each other. We're going to get that up there, but explain, if you would, how you were able to know that this map is a duplicate of Jerusalem.
Actually, what happened was I just about completely finished with the research. It took about 190 pages. But what I was looking for, I was going online and I was looking for a map of Jerusalem at the time of Jeremiah, because that's when these things were hidden. It was under Jeremiah's authorization that they hid all these things. So there's 3 prophets right there, major prophets at the time. And when I was looking, I saw a picture, and I looked at it and I thought, why in the world would they draw Qumran upside down? Because the south end of Qumran is like the north end of Jerusalem. So what I'm telling you is Whenever I realized, I thought, oh my gosh, Qumran is an image of Jerusalem in the wilderness. Now that plays into a lot of different things in prophecy. But just know this: when I looked at it and I compared the locations on the copper scroll, they are, you rotate Qumran around, even the names, they're the same. The Pool of Siloam is the double entry mikveh. The water system is the same as Jerusalem. The temple location is the same as the teacher of righteousness, Israel.
Okay, are you saying that there? Okay, help me out here. I'm trying to keep up with you. Are you trying to say? Yeah, I've got it now. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Mark. Are you trying to say, Jim, that what they did was this a group of Jewish folks that just simply replicated Jerusalem right there in Qumran?
Not just any Jewish folks. No, I'm telling you, this was the home of the prophet. Listen closely. This is where all the prophets, you hear about them coming out of the desert. Well, that's the wilderness. They came out of the wilderness like when David and Bathsheba messed up. Nathan the prophet comes out of the wilderness. Well, guess where he's coming from? He was coming from Qumran. I'm telling you, that is the home of the prophets, and there's going to be a.
Okay, so are you saying that you're saying these prophets laid out Qumran to look like in a very small scale?
Probably Samuel.
In what?
Probably the prophet Samuel was one that laid out Qumran to match up.
But basically in a very, very small scale, they matched up Jerusalem and Qumran to look the same. So where they would have different religious sites or things, they did that in Qumran to match Jerusalem on small scale.
Yes. Okay. And even things of value in Jerusalem would be matched up, because later we want to show how the findings are all in a line. Now, to look at this area and then to say, okay, here's 3, 1 or 2 line up, okay, 3, 5 in a straight line, matching this. To me, this is one of the things that Jim did that's really incredible, because if you look at Qumran and Jerusalem, the way they actually are. And now, if you flip it over, and the next slide will probably show it flipped over, and you'll see, look how they match. And so the column of Boaz, you could match that up. The mikvahs and the water places, the Qumran water system matching up, the fountain matching up with the fountain gate. Mm-hmm. See, so many points. It couldn't. The watchtowers. I mean, you could almost see an exact reproduction. Once it's flipped over, well, even I can see it, but I don't think I didn't have the insight to flip it over. To me, that was one of the big clues that, wow, we're on the right track, and this really is a treasure map. So these men put it there so that only people that studied would eventually find the treasures. It reminds me of what Jesus did. Remember when Jesus was teaching, he'd speak the parables. So everyone heard the same words. But later, the religious people go away and say, what in the world did he mean? And Jesus then would explain to the disciples, here's what I meant. And he said, yeah, remember the prophet Isaiah said, they'll have ears, but they won't hear. They'll have eyes, but they won't see. And so here we are, we're looking at this thing, and when someone breaks the code, I can say, oh, wow, that matches. But until the code was broken, it's a great mystery.
And again, Jim, Barfield, you're the only one to have broken this code, right?
Yes, sir.
Wow. Okay, so I want to reiterate here, make sure we got this right. These Old Testament prophets were making Qumran to lay out just like Jerusalem, but in miniature. And then you believe, Jim, do I have this right? You believe they were hiding various treasures at these various points that you could find once you discovered the code.
Well, they didn't just go hide them there. They had just been attacked by the Babylonians. They had been attacked by the Babylonians, and they almost lost that property. They fought, and they won the battle against the Babylonians, and they kept the property. But like 130 of the priests that were there that fought the battle died. There's 100 that were left over, at least 100 that were left over. And what they did is they broke those 500 men into teams, 5 different teams. That way, when they buried these items, because they had to do something with them, their property was destroyed, their temple, their treasury was destroyed. So what they did is they took, each one of those men took their team and they buried their items. Then the next team came on, buried their items, because you can see, I've got it mapped out on a map. Excuse me. The one quadrant of the Qumran, the majority of the gold and silver was buried by one particular team member or prophet. Then the next section. So they divided it up so that would work out incredibly well.
Wow. Now, again, their goal in burying these obviously would be so that their enemies wouldn't drag it off, right? So it would be preserved. And you guys, yeah, Rob?
Yeah, see, okay, when Babylon comes, they stole treasures out of the house of God. And you can imagine the feeling people had, because these things were dedicated to God. And they're thinking God deserved the best. And so this is the finest gold. This is the finest silver. These are items that are made. It's so incredible that in Daniel chapter 5, the night that Babylon is defeated and goes to the Medes and the Persians, and Daniel is the head of gold going to the chest of silver. And remember that Belshazzar said, I'm going to have a party. I'm going to make it the most exciting party. So he says, go and take the vessels taken out of the house of God. These are dedicated to God. He makes a mockery, really, of the God of Israel by drinking out of these vessels to his God.
So he's taking these instruments back from Qumran to Babylon, and he's using them in his party and sexual orgies, what had been dedicated to God, to be used in worship of God. Now he's blaspheming it and mocking them and drinking out of them.
And God says, this night, the kingdom stripped from you.
And for those of you who don't know the story, just for those, remember, who don't know these stories, the Bible says that there was this hand that wrote on the wall, what?
It says your kingdom is weighed and found wanting. And remember, Daniel said, I don't want to be a ruler of it. He said that it spared his life. Because when the Medes and the Persians came and Daniel refused to be a third ruler of that kingdom, his life was spared, but the Babylonians, their kingdom was destroyed on the very night. So to take something that's dedicated to God and to use it in a sacrilegious way is really deserves God's judgment. I shudder because I watched what we did on Resurrection Day in our White House. And here we are, we're saying no religious symbols. What are we talking about? They wouldn't even call it the Easter Bunny. They call it the Oyster Bunny. Transvisible Day. God's going to hold
Transgender Visibility Day, March 31st, by the Biden regime. And the Bible actually says not to mix the holy with the profane.
So there we are. Well, prior to this, Solomon has so much gold and so much silver. And knowing that, okay, what do we do this? I think that probably some of them said, for self-protection, let's bury it here. And maybe, and Jim is the expert on this, but maybe that's even where some of the gold and silver came from. That Zerubbabel, when he rebuilt the temple, it could have come from some of these things, because those people would have known where some of these locations are.
Jim?
Yeah, he's right. They actually, one of the locations, location number 31, I believe, it says that at the appointed time, this is what you use. I'm paraphrasing, but at the appointed time, that's when these things will be revealed, brought out of the ground.
Let me stop right there. You're saying that the copper scroll says that at the appointed time, these things are going to be discovered.
Yes.
And here you are, you believe, based on the scans that you have done, and this is one of the slides, based on the scans that you've done with this metal detector, you're seeing red, orange, and blue indicating gold, silver, brass, and green indicates iron or steel, but yet it's all lining up in Qumran with this miniature of what would be Jerusalem, and you're finding all these things. And if we go back down a few slides, here we have that one section, which I guess is, I've been told by Rob in past interviews, is one small section. That's not even as big, it's not even the biggest one, but in that one small section, you have the equivalent of this much gold, which would be about what, $2.5 billion?
Yes.
And then we go to Ezekiel 38, which we just read, that says that the enemies of Israel are going to invade her for her treasure, for booty, for gold and silver. Well, you know, Rob and I have talked about that. Dr. Andy Woods and I have talked about that for years. Well, maybe one day, Dr. Jimmy DeYoung and I, who's now passed away, talked for years about, well, maybe they're going to find silver and gold, a massive, huge find. Maybe they'll find Solomon's tomb, Solomon's mines. And so we speculated for some time that eventually there could be the discovery of gold and silver. And then here comes along Jim Barfield, who reads and decodes the copper scroll and says, wait a minute, this lines up with Qumran and the Jerusalem, and boom, let's scan it, and we start finding what may be massive deposits of stored gold and silver. So I guess everybody's asking, when does the digging begin, and how does that process happen?
Well, I'll tell you what. Even if I knew, I wouldn't tell. Because I got to worry about the safety of the people. I got to worry about the safety of these items. I feel personally responsible to a degree, but the Israelis have got some pretty serious detection equipment as well out there, detecting people out there. So I feel reasonably safe that those items are safe where they sit today.
So what you're saying is the Israeli government is aware of this. The Israeli government's protecting that area.
Well, they were protected before this area.
Okay.
It sits in an area where if Jordans came over, that would be one of the areas that they'd come over at. And I'm not saying they do that. But what I am saying is it's well protected at this point.
Okay. So what else do we need to know? I'm going to go and check and see if any of you guys are leaving any comments under the players here. Under the players, there's a button for comment. You can leave a comment or a question, and I'll ask it. Let me pick up with this slide right here. What do we got right here, guys?
That is a drawing. I did that exactly to the dimensions on Qumran. I had a picture, and I did that with an art program. And that just shows where all the hard targets are at, meaning areas that are gray, nothing can be buried there. So I use that to help me to determine where each one of these locations were at within the set of ruins.
Okay. Well, you want to tell us about this?
Yes. At the steps extending eastward, 40 cubits long are civil service vessels weighing 17 talents. That's the one that was the very first one on the copper scroll. That's the one I showed you with the 40 cubit long mikvah or baptismal pool.
Okay.
I want to go to the slide where we have several of these lined up, and you'll notice they'll have a yellow dot and a line connecting them. I think that's an important point. If you can see those on the slides that we sent to you.
There should be two of them. One with 3 and one with 5.
Tell me where we're going here.
Go a little further.
Right there.
There we go. Mm-hmm.
Actually, that's locations starting bottom left. That's location 53, 54, 55, 56, and 57. But what's interesting, when I found that and I realized they were in a perfectly straight line, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, whoever this is, whoever wrote that last 5 was talking to me. Do you realize that? That guy was telling me, Jimmy, just follow the yellow brick road, go 53, 54, and you'll find the most important location of all, which is location number 57. But there's another 3, the very first 3, if you can find them on your pictures there. There should be another one with 3 in a row. It may not be on.
Yeah, I don't think we have these in here. This is all we got.
Well, you'll have to take my word for it until we can find it and get it up on.
Okay.
Those 5 are in a straight line, and the first 3, location number 1, 2, and 3 being the cave, 57 being the cave, they wanted desperately for us to be able to find that, because I think what happened was this. They had so much treasure that they put in the cave first, because that's like putting it in a vault, that they had to take the leftovers and bury it outside in the ruins of Qumran. So can you imagine how much might be inside of that cave near Qumran?
Wow. And by the way, pull that down. Let me go to another picture here. This is something I just, was thinking about, and I went and found it, that, even Hollywood obviously Indiana Jones has some understanding of this, but here is Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark. There's that guy when they got there in those mountains and cave areas. They open up the Ark of the Covenant, and that's when they all melt. But this is the guy pretending to be the high priest with that breastplate we were talking about. So even Hollywood understands this, don't they, guys?
Yes, they do.
Yeah, that's what's kind of interesting, because back in the days when I first started this whole thing, Vinda was really looking more for the kyle, the pot made of a mixture of clay of an animal and dung. And so, but Hollywood thought it's more exciting if you're looking for the Ark of the Covenant. The truth is, there was there was truth in that the Ark of the Covenant could be there. And certainly the vipers were there. I was in the cave a time or two, and when you hear the vipers, you can be pretty brave. And then when the temperatures, I'm not kidding you, Joe and I were laughing. I was there one time, it was 130 degrees in the morning. And they want me to dig. I can't dig. All I can do is drink, and I'm drinking water after water. And then I hear the vipers, and I'm going to let the kids dig. And so Hollywood takes this and manipulates it into a story. But you go back and you see, the Ark of the Covenant could well be there. But that's more exciting to people than a clay dung pot for ashes. The breastplate, they obviously saw that. Why? That would be such a find. I can't think of anything that would be more Jewish and more profound than to find the breastplate of the high priest. And so they sort of captured the point of that. Think about how long ago that movie was. And so they were just taking a thumbnail sketch of this, but trying to show that there was genuine treasures there. And the treasures goes way beyond the value of the silver and gold. It's in the artifacts themselves.
And what's fascinating to me is, when I saw that movie in 1981, 82, whatever year it came out, and I'm sitting there watching that, and I've seen it a gazillion times since then, never did I think that one day I'd be sitting and talking to a guy that was on the verge of discovering all this with my friend Dr. Rob Lindstedt sitting next to him. I mean, how interesting is it that we've watched these things that have even become a part of pop culture, but most importantly, the Bible. And here we are in our day and time talking about it, where you may be on the verge of finding these things right as the enemies of Israel are on their doorstep in Syria. There in Syria, you got, obviously at times China's been in there. You got Russia, you got Iran, you got Turkey. And then you've got the 5 red heifers over there. You've got the desire for the tabernacle, a temporary temple, a tabernacle, then the temple. You've got all the garments prepared, all the instruments prepared. Again, the temple choir. We have video of the temple choir, the men practicing. We have, what else? The clothes made, the costumes made. I mean, who would have ever thought?
And this weekend at Ancient Shiloh, they actually did a conference on looking at the location of a temple, and they talked about, it was the Red Heifer Conference. 120 people attended. No media was there. I happen to have 4 or 5 slides. If you look at today's program, B-Tip program today, I put 4 of those slides in there, and they show, here's what it looks like with the Dome of the Rock here. Here's what it looks like when this thing changes, and there's a temple there. And remember how many times we've talked about how you sit on the Mount of Olives, you line it up with the East Gate, and that's where this sacrifice, that's where this temple or tabernacle will be built. And that's exactly what took place at this conference. Some of the people attending there's no media there. Fortunately, we have 4 little slides from it. But some of the people had assault rifles. Why? Because, and you can pull that up on today's program if people want to see it.
Unless Mark wants to just send that one over to me as well, real quick.
Yeah, he'll get it sent to you. And but what's interesting is for the Jewish people, it says we're about to begin sacrifices. For the Christians, we say we're about to see Bible prophecy fulfilled. For Islam, you know what they say? This is a threat. I mean, these are the words from the conference. This is a threat, because if is true, then Israel really does have a claim to the Temple Mount. And if that's true, then they have a right to pray up there. And so Hamas, they even said, that's why they moved up the attack to October the 7th. And Hezbollah actually responded saying, I mean, this is in today's news in Jerusalem. Hezbollah said, you know what, with the excitement there, that we have to intensify the fighting because we don't want this to lead to the argument that the Jews actually own the Temple Mount. Wow. And so we're looking at Israel's the hour hand, Jerusalem's the minute hand, the Temple Mount's the second hand, and this all fits right together. You talk about a convergence of things taking place. We're looking at the convergence right to a moment of time.
If you have any questions, folks, just email me, Brannon@worldviewweekend.com. Maybe throw that up on the screen if you don't mind, Thomas. If you want to, I'll answer ask them some of your questions. If you want to send some over, Brannon, Brannon, Brannon @worldviewweekend.com. Be sure you spell it with 2 W's in a row, WORLDVIEWWEEKND.com. Brannon, BRANNON @worldviewweekend.com. If you want to send over any of your questions, I'll endeavor to ask some of them here from these gentlemen. Let's go back to this PowerPoint presentation, keynote. Let's take a look at this. North end of the heap room for a large cave buried opening by the edge stone gauntlet. What is this?
That is the first picture I ever took of that location. It was my wife and I went over there, took our backpacks, and just went over to check everything out to make sure that I was really seeing what I was determined. And I was. But what I was doing is I had a cheap Walmart camera, and it wouldn't adjust, couldn't focus, zoom in and out. I had to back up to get all of that in frame. And I was trying to figure out, make sure that was the location I should be looking at. But you see there, it's at the north end of the heap. It's large enough as a room for a large cave. The opening is buried by the edge. And I'm looking at this thing and I'm thinking, what in the world do they mean by the edge? Well, then as I got done taking the picture, I lowered the camera and I turned around to look. I had walked up a little hill, a berm, and right behind me was about a 75 to 100 foot drop. That's what they meant by the edge. And my point is this. All of these locations that I'm telling you about, they are easily determined once you know where to look. And when I determined that Qumran was the place that I was supposed to be looking at, they just started coming.
And so what do you think is, if you were to open that up, what do you think is under there?
Oh, well, there's 3 different documents, depending on what you want to look at. There's the Apocalypse of Baruch, there's the Melech, and then there's a copper scroll, and Second Maccabees. Excuse me. 3 of those additional documents, Melech and the other 2, they say that all of the tabernacle, the tabernacle of Moses, and all the implements, meaning the table of showbread, altar of incense, and the Ark of the Covenant, are inside of that cave.
Okay, wait a minute. So you're telling me the copper scroll tells you what is at each location?
Yes.
And so you're saying that at this location, they're telling you all those things are there, and maybe the Ark of the Covenant is there?
On the copper scroll, it says all the treasures of the house. Those are the gold and silver ingots. That's not what they're talking about. They're talking about the most treasured items in the world. The tabernacle. Can you imagine seeing the actual tabernacle that Moses traveled in the wilderness with for 40 years?
So it would be, I'm guessing at this point, it's collapsed down, stored away in some kind of container. There would be the actual tabernacle tent that he traveled with.
Yes, if I'm correct. And everybody thinks I'm correct. Well, not everybody, but the majority of the people. I had a meeting with the head of the Antiquities Authority, and the person that introduced me to him was a Comanche lady from Lawton, Oklahoma, who I was working for at the Comanche Nation College as a teacher and instructor. She introduced me to the head of the Antiquities Authority of Israel because he was at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, doing artillery training, and Fort Sill, Oklahoma is the artillery capital of the world. So all these strange things come around, and she calls Shuka Dorfman, says, hey, there's a guy in Oklahoma I need you to talk to. She sets up the meeting. And I go to Israel, and I sit down with this guy, Shuka Dorfman, and we have about an hour and a half meeting, and at first he thought I was a nut, which I get it. I understand, how many people from Lawton, Oklahoma firefighters find all the treasures of the Tabernacle. And I asked him if he knew what the copper scroll was. He said, of course. I showed him the first one, he was leaning back. I showed him the second one, he leaned forward. I showed him the third one, he really started looking, but when I hit the fourth one, oh my goodness. He pulled my document in front of him and stopped everything, excuse me, reached in his leather bag, pulls out his cell phone and calls his secretary and arranges a meeting with myself, Chris Knight, my buddy, Yitzhak Magen, the head of the ADCA, Antiquities Department of Civil Administration.
I have no idea why these graphics are going off. I don't know if you guys can see it, but
somebody's excited about the meeting.
How'd that happen? Oh, it's your hand movements. Your hand movements are making fireworks and those symbols go off. Oh, the camera. Good. That's interesting. All right. Anyway, so he calls his secretary, and what does she say?
She set it up. She set up the meeting. That was Shabbat, just before Shabbat. So 2 days, 3 days, I think it's 3 or 4 days later, I met with Yitzhak Magen, Yuval Peleg, and Shuka Dorfman. And we go over my research. Here's what the archaeologist said, Yuval Peleg. In Hebrew, he said, oh my gosh, this guy's figured it out. He's done it. Shuka Dorfman in Hebrew says, tell him. Yuval said in Hebrew, no, I want to hear more. So that's how that meeting went. Can you imagine?
What year was that? What year was that?
2008.
So how much longer is it going to take before you guys start digging?
He's in charge.
Wow. Okay. So what?
God is in charge of that.
What would it?
But I'm going to tell you, I don't believe it's going to be very long at all.
So what would it mean if you guys bring up the tabernacle that was moved around by the children of Israel out in the wilderness? You bring up different things that we've talked about, including, let's just go out on a limb. Say you bring up the Ark of the Covenant. If Hamas is losing it over 5 red heifers, they are going to chop their own heads off when you find the Ark of the Covenant, which proves this is obviously the land of the Israelites with their Ark of the Covenant. They're going to absolutely go nuts.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. This area is a sensitive area. And one of the first slides we looked at was the Valley of Achor. And that valley, it's kind of a crossing point. There's so many people that would claim this. And so that's why timing is important. That's why there's a political framework, there's a military framework. And right now, there's such a mess going on in Israel. And part of the problem is our current administration. Our administration right now, they won't even concede that Israel has a right to defend themselves. They continue to put up a two-state solution. Wow, I mean, this is the craziest thing in the world. And actually, neither side wants a two-state solution. The Palestinians say we want it all, and Israel has been given it all by God. And so right now, if let's say it was found tomorrow, with the current administration, I can see them stripping away the treasure and giving it away. And so the timing is important. And,
well, they turned around and gave custody of the Temple Mount to Jordan, did they not? That was a dumb move.
Yeah, unbelievable. You know, one of the things, going back to the picture where we looked at the sinkhole, and it talks about the edge, and there's another picture after that I think is really neat, because in the actual writing of the scroll, of the copper scroll, it talks about the edge. I mean, it's a word that's right there, the edge. And then you can see that he's standing right on the edge. How high was that cliff that's there?
About 7,500 feet high.
Yeah.
So you're saying that right there is the hole But you're saying right there where that arrow's pointing was this drop.
No, that actually where that arrow is pointing is where that cave is that you saw on the first slide.
Okay.
You understand the cave was buried.
Okay.
And they took, what they did is they took mortar and stones and they blocked it up. There's 3 documents that talk about this. They block it up and they sealed it with a mortar. Now here's the interesting thing. I've got some other pictures where it shows me sitting with Yuval Peleg, the archaeologist, and behind us is about 2 shelves made out of some kind of mortar. Well, I took that mortar, sent it off to Skokie, Illinois, had it tested, and I had one of the men that works at Masada, the guy that mixes a mortar, and he does it the ancient way. Both of those people said one of them said it's definitely man-made material. The Skokie, Illinois said it's most likely man-made material. Now, why would there be man-made material in a place where I think is the cave? If they plastered it shut, there was leftover mortar there. So, is it that the right place? I absolutely believe it is, because all the details, all the instructions match that.
And what makes you think what made this sinkhole open up?
Well, the only way sinkholes open up is there's a void beneath it and there's rain. Qumran does not get a lot of rain. They get about a ½ inch per year, but they had a lot of rain, and literally more than normal at Qumran. And when I went back, that sinkhole was there.
Now, don't show my screen because I want to give people's private info away. But Cindy wants to know. She said, and you guys can email in your questions. I was in Israel in 2020. One day I was in Qumran. Could I have been standing over one of the caves full of treasures and not even known it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely, because it's not a very big place, and I'm telling you, it's just when they dug these things out. Of course, they had 5 different teams, but they buried them all over the place at Qumran. I'm not going to show you the big map with all the locations on it, but they did all over the place. Matter of fact, as soon as you walk in and you go past that big building on the left, that ancient building, you're walking right over gems, silver, all kinds of stuff.
Rick,
tell her not to feel bad. I walked over it 70 times.
70 times. Wow. Rick wants to know if you, Jim, had figured this out in 2009. Why is it front and center today? Why not front and center earlier than today?
And this is a overly simplified, but God has got a plan, and all I am is the spokesman and the guy that located these things. This is going to be up to God, and it has to be in the exact right moment, because everything. Look at all of this is coming together now. The heifers, the cliff, you name it. There's just all kinds of different things happening now. It's got to be at the exact right moment for God to reveal.
So are you telling me that providentially God has stopped you, didn't give you the motivation to visit with people like Rob Lindstedt and talk about this, who then called me and came on my show, and then I said, well, let's get him on with you? I mean, are you saying that since 2009, God has somehow restrained you from coming forward until now?
I believe so. Yeah. Yes, because I've been getting all kinds of requests for interviews. Some major networks have contacted me. They're wanting me to interview with them. And it's just all of a sudden within the last 3 weeks.
We're getting one of the first interviews. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I think people don't understand when, like, in visiting Israel, we've driven by a place called Magdala, the place of Mary Magdalene, by the Cave of the Winds. And so Jesus, going from Nazareth to the Sea of Galilee, would come right there, and no doubt would come through the city. And I've watched that being developed for 35 years. Over 35 years, in the last 2 years, we're actually now taking a tour through that, and we've seen a stone that they would have put the scrolls on. That's how long it took for this to come to pass. And so Shiloh, I look at Dr. Scott Stripping up there. I mean, sometimes it looks like you say, what's he doing for the last 10 years, 12 years? Well, there's a right moment when he gets permission to look for these cornerstones, and he might be convinced 10 years earlier it's there, but you have to really be patient, and sooner or later you have to say, we've got to rely on God opening the door. that's what we think this may be a moment that God is looking at, because these things are converging together and there's such interest in it. And so, yeah, I think this could be a very important moment in church history and Bible history.
Here is Fran. Hi, Brandon. Could they please expand on what they were saying about what was said as to when this treasure will be found in relation to God?
Yeah, there's, like I said, there's 3 documents, Emek HaMelech, Second Maccabees, and Baruch, the Apocalypse of Baruch. And they all say, these items will not be found until the time of the coming of the Messiah. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I believe the time of the coming of the Messiah is very, very soon.
Well, when you add up all the things we've talked about tonight that are falling into place, yeah, I mean, and so many of them line up with what Jesus himself spoke about. They'll be looking for in Matthew 24, not to mention other things we read about in the Bible. Phil wants to know, fascinating show, first of all. Please ask, how sure is he that it is actually gold and silver that he has found? What percentage on a scale of 1 to 100, what percent are you that you actually have found gold and silver with those readings?
It's an excellent metal detector. I'm going to say 90%.
Wow. Could he be wrong? What are the chances that you're wrong? So about 10% that you're wrong, 90% that you're right.
Yeah, the reason I say that and why I'm so sure is because when we scanned it, all those ratings were exactly in the spots where I'd marked on my maps.
Are they not worried about their or Israel's security giving of all of the details? And what you've already said is that you haven't given all the details. Plus this is being guarded. So there you go.
Yes.
Another question from Dawn. Can you please explain the significance of Qumran being the inverted image of Jerusalem? How does that show where the treasure is?
That has nothing to do with the treasure. What that has all to do with is about what you and I believe. I believe that in Scripture it talks about a new Jerusalem. It talks about a Jerusalem. I think they built that location, and I believe it's probably by Samuel, built that location for worship, because another thing that I haven't mentioned tonight is it's also, I believe, absolutely believe that was home to the Melchizedek order. So those of you who've ever studied that, it's a very mysterious group, but not anymore. I think we're going to learn so much. And then, again, this is an answer to our question. We're going to learn so much from Qumran about the Messiah. We're going to learn about Scripture. We're going to be able to, and I promise you, that if I'm right, inside of that cave is going to be more than just gold and silver. That's not the important stuff. Books, scrolls of all different kinds, from prophets, you name it. It's going to be, but they're going to be in a much more pristine condition than what they found with the Dead Sea Scrolls. So religiously speaking, it's incredibly important.
And Rob, help me out here. If we find these kind of writings from prophets or other historians, particularly the other historians, I'm not worried about that. We have the writings, the extra biblical revelations, or extra biblical writings, I should say, not revelations. The extra biblical writings of people like Josephus, the ancient Jewish historian Josephus. We don't equate that with the Bible. There's just good historical document, external proof that confirms the Bible. But if you start finding writings of prophets, how do we distinguish between the Bible and not saying that those scrolls are inspired? Can you help me with that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, if we go to just the Qumran scrolls, and we see how the Bible has been preserved. Matter of fact, in the scroll of the museum, there's a whole museum for the Qumran scrolls, and it's distinguishable because the top of it looks like the lid of a jar, symbolizing how the scrolls were found in these jars. And you look at the Bible that we have today, and the Bible that we find, portions of Scripture that we find, the accuracy is incredible. The book of Isaiah, is put there, a picture of it, not the actual thing. It's too precious. And if you go through the whole book of Isaiah, there may be 7 or 8 or 9 words that are not exactly what we read in our Bible. And all of these, like maybe instead of saying town, it says city. I mean, There's none of this a different word altogether. It's a derivative of that word, or it could be an alternate translation of that word. So what's different about the book of Isaiah than any other book? We have Isaiah exactly right. We have it as God gave it to the prophet Isaiah. And so if we have Isaiah right, we have the other parts of the Bible right. So we come and now we find these instruments. We find these things that are out of the house of the tabernacle. So there are people who say, well, Moses didn't really cross the Red Sea. It was the Reed Sea. And the armies of Pharaoh drowned in 2 inches of mud. No, this is the Bible. This is God's word. If he said they drowned in the Red Sea, they went across the Red Sea, not the Reed Sea. And so what it's going to do is going to say, look, we study the Bible because this is the truth of God. What we need is the truth of God, and that's in the Bible. So we go back, and these documents, they're going to be 2,500 years old. Some of these might have been placed in these caves by Jeremiah. Can you imagine if when you go into this cave, the last person that was in this cave was Jeremiah as he set that letter there? I mean, these are.
Are you thinking that some of these scrolls could be not the autograph, that would be the original, but would be a manuscript of some of the Old Testament books?
All of the Old Testament books, not some of them.
So all of the Old Testament books, there'll be manuscripts, just to make sure the audience understands. An autograph is an original, and then a manuscript is a copy of the original. Do you think you're going to find autographs or manuscripts?
I think it's very possible that we find actual signatures of the people handwritings, like Baruch. The community rule was written by Baruch. And guess who was dictating to him? And this is a Dead Sea Scroll. So there are, let me give you another one. As you go enter into the Qumran ruins, the entrance, it says that below there are some really important, biblical items, but there's also a scroll. And you had to know that scroll before you could enter in and be part of that community. And it was a scroll of Haggai. Now, if you read the scroll of Haggai, and I'm sure you have, it's 5-10 minute read at the tops. But there was a special scroll, that scroll, or there's another scroll that I believe that Haggai wrote that was buried right at the entrance. So everything, all of the scrolls that are in the Old Testament, they found fragments of them in the caves, except for the book of Esther. I don't think they found anything from Esther in there. But what I'm telling you is, I think all of the scrolls, all the prophets, they're going to be represented there. Only I believe that they will be entire text sealed in those clay jars.
And are you saying you believe that they will be the autographs, the originals, or manuscripts, copies of the originals?
Well, that'd be tough to say, but let's go with copies of the originals.
But you wouldn't be shocked if you wouldn't be shocked if one or two of them could be an original.
No, I wouldn't be shocked at all.
Okay, because I don't think we have any originals of some of these, do we?
Not yet.
Just pieces at best of some of these are just manuscripts.
Except
I don't think we have any autographs, do we?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Yeah, me neither.
However, did I tell you about the Melchizedek scroll? It's a fragment. Ladies and gentlemen, that one is amazing. And we don't have time tonight, but if we ever get the chance, you need to hear that one because it gives the date of the crucifixion of the Messiah to the year. The Messiah was crucified in a Jubilee year. It just goes on and on and on. And very important.
Let me ask you this. Can we talk? I've already talked to Rob off camera. We need to talk about booking you to be a keynote speaker with Rob at our upcoming Ozarks Worldview Weekend, November 1st, Friday night, November 1st at Lake of the Ozarks. Would you be interested in doing that?
Absolutely.
All right, let's talk. We'll cover all your expenses, honorarium, workman's worthy of his hire. We'll take care of all that. But I think our audience would love to get you two guys in a room, show some of this, talk about some of the things talk about now, visit with you. Our audience, it'll be our 21st annual Ozarks Worldview Weekend. People come from all over the country for it. So we'll look to do that. That's a little tease to the audience. And yeah, we have already booked the dates, folks. October 31st. will be the banquet concert, as we always do on Thursday night. That's optional. Conference gets underway November 1st, and then that's Friday night. Saturday, November 2nd. Sunday mornings, our church service. Dr. Woods preaches, and then we call it a day. So go ahead and mark your calendar for November 1, 2, and Sunday morning the 3rd. And then we'll let you know the dates and when you can start registering. We sell out every year. Sharon wants to know, as we get ready to wrap up here, Sharon wants to know, considering the nearness of the rapture, will there be time to dig and recover the gold, etc., before that happens? What do you think, Dr. Rob?
Well, I'm looking for the Lord to come at any time. So maybe Jim's done the hard work and we'll let other people do it. You know, I don't know the Lord's timing. I've been looking for the Lord to come. And every morning I wake up, I think this is probably going to be the day. So I try to live this day like it's my last day. And if the Lord allows us to be here when all these are found, that's great. Or maybe he's going to save it for someone to take this research and go. But since I'm looking for the Lord to come, you know, I still have 3 hours to look for him yet to come today. So I'm not going to give up hope until
how about this one? Bonnie wants to know, do you think Jeremiah's deed of Anathoth will be there too?
That is a great question, and yes, I do. I do believe it was there because remember where that deed was from? It was from the land of Benjamin. Well, guess where Qumran sits today? It's in the land of Benjamin.
And again,
so yes, I do believe it's going to be there.
And how is that going to set with the Islamists?
Oh, from what I understand, they're going to just set down their stuff and grab their suitcases and walk off and say, okay, that's it. We better not.
We know they won't.